Hello. Hi. Welcome to the live stream. I think we are live, at least according to YouTube. It is Monday, June 1st, 1:29 p.m. here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. My name is Q. I hope you are doing well. Over on your side. Hang on. It's been a while since I've done this live stream thing, so I had to kind of get used to OBS, the streaming software, and my setup to make sure everything is working okay. Yeah, hope things are as well as they can be over on your side. Times are hard right now. And for today's stream, I'm going to be touching upon a very interesting and not very often used UI development technique. That is ghost elements. I don't know if they're actually called ghost elements. It's just a term that I've used for a while. I think other terms that people may use to describe this technique may be virtual elements or dummy elements or placeholder elements. And to give you an example of ghost elements, what I'm talking about is, well, here's a very spooky ghost. And I like the term ghost because ghosts are spooky and ghosts are fun. And there's an emoji for it, right? It's fun. The very first time I discovered this technique was when I was peeking at what Shopify Polaris was doing several years ago. What I needed was some sort of text input, a text area that would magically resize itself based on the content within. So here we have the text field component from Shopify Polaris. And there is a very interesting property that you can add into it called multiline. By default, multiline is off, meaning it functions just like a regular input field. However, if you put in multiline and a particular number, say 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever it is you need, then this thing resizes itself to accommodate that those amount of rows. So here we have 1, let me just change 1, 2, 3. However, the moment that I need a new line, like that 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and so on, you can see that the text area, this input, magically resizes itself. And if you were none the wiser, you would think that this is kind of default behavior because why not? It's great, but it's actually not. By default, text inputs don't resize themselves. They are of a fixed size, like so. And if you continue to type stuff in, it stays in that certain size. Yes, you can add a CSS property to manually resize like this, but what you actually want is for it to kind of, adjust itself based on the content within. You will most likely see this interaction for things like embeddable widget forms like this. This is a Help Scout Beacon 2. I was part of this project and I worked on this very component that you're seeing on screen right here. We have a text input that can resize itself. There's also a max height and a min height and all that kind of fancy stuff built in to accommodate its size for its content, but then also respecting its size based on its container. So that's handy. Another one that you might be a little bit more familiar with would be Slack. Slack has this very same technique right here in their input area. This input resizes itself based on the content within, like so. And there is a max height for this as well. So yeah, I don't know if they use ghost elements for their particular implementation, but Shopify certainly does, and Help Scout's Beacon widget certainly does. So what do I mean by ghost elements? So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. If I inspect this thing right here, we have, of course, the text area that you're seeing on screen. However, sneaky, we have this hidden element here, this invisible element. What is this thing? Let's make it visible. Boom, boom. Oh, would you take a look at that? And every time I make some changes here, that element underneath has the exact same changes. How this works is we have a text area here, and then we have this ghost element down here. Anytime you input a change, the React component thingy manages this kind of stuff, we can forget about React for now. This has nothing to do with React. It's just a way for you to calculate sizes. So ghost elements are really helpful for you to calculate sizes in order to apply them in the way that you need it to. So here we have a dummy input that has no content right now because there's no content in our text area, and type in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. So what happens is this content gets injected into this area. That's step 1. Step 2 is the JavaScript then calculates the size for this particular dummy or ghost element. And if the size is different compared to what this one currently is, that means a resizing has happened based on the content within. And if a resizing has happened, then adjust the height for this guy. And that's how this thing knows how to grow and shrink. So I can kind of map this out over here in this Excel-a-Draw application, which is quite handy. So we have a, let's say we have our ghost guy over here. We have our element over here. Yay! Let me add a, we have that, we have that, cool. So we have our original element and we have our ghost kind of duplicate, which is hidden. Remember, it's hidden. That's how ghost elements kind of work. They're hidden, you don't see them, and they magically do their thing. Okay. And we have a change that we want to change. Yay. I group these together. Cool. So we have a change that we want to apply to our element. In this case, we're adding some text into our field, right? So we add some changes. Let's say this is the change, add text. Need to spell. Group. All right. Yay. So I want to add some text into my element. So what happens, this is the order of operations. We first add it to our ghost area, right? And this happens way too fast. You don't actually see it when you're interacting with the field, but behind the scenes, this is what happens step by step. So we add the text here, and it may resize, it may not, but let's just pretend it does resize, right? So then after adding the text here, and we can then do a height check, like, oh, instead of being, say, 100 pixels tall, it is now 150. Oh, okay, cool. So now we know that by adding this text, there is a height change. We're going to apply this change over here. Oh, it's no longer 100, it's now 150. Bam. That happens in one fell swoop, and that is how you get a magically resizing text area based on your text changes. Wonderful. And that's make it dotted so we know that's hidden. Cool. That's a good suggestion. How do I hash solid thin border dotted? Yeah. Thanks, Sean. Thank you so much. I don't know. I don't use this thing very often. Bold. Extra bold. Yeah, cool. So another really interesting example of ghost elements in practice is providing a resize callback event for elements. So a new thing, not new, but something that's been popping up more often is the requirement for having something like element queries. What I mean by that is, by default, your browser gives you media queries. You're able to change styles based on the size of your window, right? You resize your window to a certain size, your elements adjust their styles accordingly, and that's how you do responsive styles. However, there is a need for you to be able to pay attention to how big a certain container is. Like, I want to change the styles of this text based on the size of this box, not the size of the browser. And by default, CSS can't accommodate this, so you need a little bit of JavaScript help in order for you to detect, well, when size changes. And one very interesting technique for you to do this is to leverage a ghost iframe to do this. And that is how some of the more popular libraries work. So here, this is React Resize Aware. Again, this is not a React thing at all. You can apply this to any JavaScript setup you have. I just happen to be working with React a lot. So let me just get rid of all this for now. and let's just build it from scratch. It's quite simple, actually. So here we have a div, and excuse my inline styles because I'm just going to write this super fast. Style, and then we have a width of, I don't know, 50 VW. VW is viewport width. Height is 20 VH. VH is viewport height. We're going to have a background of, let's give it a color so you can see it. What a hot pink. Yeah. So now if I save, we can see a hot pink square that is approximately 50% width of the browser and 20% height of the browser. So if I resize it, this thing resizes a bit. Cool. Now it's complaining about stuff. Let me just get rid of those Shopify Polaris things. So hopefully it doesn't complain anymore. All right. Refresh. Stop complaining. It's still complaining about something. I don't know. So if I do an on resize and just console log this right here for this div, console log, not long, then if I resize, nothing happens just because, well, on resize is not a valid callback for this div, right? React complains. So what we need is we're going to inject this kind of ghost iframe here. Like the resize callback event works for Windows. By window, I mean like the window element of your browser. So if you do window, that's what I'm talking about. Iframes also have windows, so you can tap into that. So if I do style, what I have to do is I have to make sure that the iframe is the exact same size as my box. So what you kind of need to do is you do something like position absolute, top 0, left 0, right 0, bottom 0. And the last thing I need to do is I need to make sure that the parent div has a position of relative. That way this magical ghost iframe can snap to something. And I'm going to make this one display inline block. Again, excuse my messy inline styles. Make sure you don't do this when you do the real thing. Display inline block, height something something, something's not right. Something's complaining. Why are you complaining? Iframe? What is this? Must have a, oh, that's not relevant. That's fine. Oh yeah, height probably because there's no box bounding, border boxy nonsense. Width 100%. Now are you cool? Yeah. So now the iframe is the exact same size as my pink box. And right now resizing doesn't do anything. That's because we need to actually add a listener to the resize event. So I need to leverage a couple of hooks here. So I'm going to do use effect. This is again a very React thing. Do this in the library that you choose, that you have. But this is a very React thing. So I need to have the element, this iframe element, and you can do that by using refs inside of React. Frame ref equals use ref, and then we're going to set this ref. Ref is frame ref. All right, cool. So now I need the actual iframe itself. I'm going to borrow some code from this thing, get target. Yes. Get target is blah, 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 blah. Cool. Frame ref, okay. Console log, const target equals get target. So what I have right now is I have the actual iframe itself, console log target. Use ref not defined. Oh, of course, because I didn't import it. Silly me. Okay, great. So now I have the window. Cool. So now what you can do is you can do this something like this. Right now there's still no resizing event, but if I do target, add event, come on, it's lagging. Listener resize, console log that. If only I can type. Okay, it's struggling just because I haven't optimized it, blah, blah, blah. But, would you take a look at that? Every single time I resize my browser, right? Because the iframe, this ghost iframe, provides a resize callback, I can tap into it, and then from that, I can then get the sizing of the iframe and then apply it to something else. So what effectively, I'm using a ghost iframe to create a listener. Some resized listener that the browser doesn't give you by default for elements, and then you can do something with it. So yeah, it's a very, very interesting kind of technique to to tap into like a made-up resize event. And I didn't use this technique in particular, this iframe technique, but I used something. I used a ghost technique for what I'm about to show you. Might need to move my video. Ah, I think it's a little bit better. Thanks, Sean. I need to pay attention to the chat a little bit more. So what you're seeing right here is some experimental work that I've been tinkering with the column block for Gutenberg, and that is I'm trying to add resizing, the ability to resize by clicking and dragging inline within the block itself. So here I have 4 column blocks, or a column block with 4 columns. 1, 2, 3, 4. All of them are equal sizes, 25% each. And in between them, there is a little guide that I can click and drag. Added a lot of niceties, nice enhancements, nice UI and UX enhancements to this experience. And that is, by default, it shows you a 12-column grid. And based on wherever it is I'm resizing this thing, it'll let you know, oh, right now it's 3 column. If I'm roughly approximately here, it'll snap to 4 columns. If I let go, it now snaps to 4 columns. If I'm here, it'll snap to 2 columns. Really nice. And there's other niceties here. Like for example, I can change the gap of the column. So now I have 0 gap. I have 40 pixel gaps. I'm going to change it back to 20. So I'm going to show you something here. Okay. And this I have a big to do here to improve the performance. This is not production ready or anything. I just basically brain dumped a bunch of code in order to make this work, just to prove this, just to conceptually prove that this feels good when I interact with it. There is a sneaky little ghost container here. I'm going to change the height. I put in little ghost emojis for fun. So as I drag this thing, similar to the technique of the Shopify Polaris text input, what I'm doing is I am, based on how much I've dragged, in this case, the width of this is, let's just pretend 500 pixels. I'm going to apply those numbers, which funnels through some math into the ghost area. And then if the widths are acceptable within the ghost area, then I can apply that to the real thing. So there is this kind of virtual staging area where I'm testing widths, right, for where it is I need to apply the column. And this is very handy for situations where you can see this no longer lines up. That's just because based on browser math and percentages and pixels and so on, blah, 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 math numbers happens. I can't physically drag this thing to be that much bigger. And those numbers are funneled through some math stuff and trying to be applied to the ghost area. And the ghost little columns in the ghost area kind of validates what widths need to happen. So once I let go, it'll snap to the appropriate thing. This ensures that the widths aren't gigantic, right? Because there are boundaries of how much you can drag and like grow and shrink. And with these ghost columns, I'm able to thankfully leverage existing CSS that's given to us by the browser based on percentages, display flex, and all those wonderful things that we get for free. I'm able to leverage that to figure out how to render my columns once I let go. If I didn't use the ghost technique here, which is what I initially started with, I basically had to write the math that's required to best guess how big and small the columns need to be, how accounting for gaps, accounting for pixel to percentage conversion and converting it back and all this kind of stuff. There is some of that happens here, but nowhere near as much because I'm leveraging these ghost elements that you don't get to see. because, well, they're ghosts, and ghosts are spooky, and they're hidden by default. um, we call them gutter in design speak. Oh yes, gutters. Gutters. Yes, gutters. I get confused between gutters and gaps, and I use gaps just because in the new CSS grid specification they're called gaps, grid gaps. But yeah, gutter, gaps, interchangeable. Thank you, Sean. Um, yeah, and that's how I use the ghost elements for this highly experimental column resizing experience. And yeah, it's not a very common technique. Not that it's bad. It's just the use cases are a little bit unique. You don't kind of need them everywhere. But they're very handy when you do. In the case of resizable columns, in the case of paying attention to elements when they need to resize, when the browser doesn't give you callbacks. And in the case of auto magical resizing text areas, text field. Come on. Oh, nope. Polaris text field. Yes. In the case of these guys. So another use case that I've used them before is jumping back to Help Scouts. Beacon embed thingy. Most people think rain gutter. I do too. Gutter is a strange word for me. Gaps for me feels a little bit more intuitive. So yeah, once upon a time, during early development of this thing, it kind of still has it, maybe? No, it's not as, I don't think it still has it anymore. So the height of the beacon embeddable, which is in an iframe, by the way, that's typically how embeddables work. So be it drift, intercom, help scout beacon, whatever it is, they're usually embedded in an iframe. The reason why that is because the iframe can then protect the JavaScript and the CSS to be contained, like coming from intercom or beacon or whatever it is, so that they work within the iframe. It doesn't bleed outside. On top of that, the iframe that exists within your site doesn't bleed within. It gives you this safe area where your JavaScript and your CSS can play with it, can play nicely with the environment that it's being embedded into. And there was once upon a time where the height of the iframe needed to be responsive given the content within. And that sounds like a relatively simple thing in a way. Oh, the iframe has resizable callbacks, therefore you can tap into it and just apply the height. It was a very big challenge. We decided to eventually kind of scrap that just because of the experience wasn't good. But yeah, it was a big, big challenge because you get yourself into this chicken egg scenario where the height of the content depends on the iframe, but then the iframe's height depends on the content. They kind of influence each other in this circular dependency kind of way. And then eventually what you'll get is animation that flicker because it's constantly trying to like resize itself to each other, and it's just this weird mess. Yeah, iframe extension used a lot for Chrome. Iframe technique is used a lot for Chrome extensions. Thank you, Niels. What do you say? I've tried this once and ultimately decided to use React Beautiful D&D. Yeah, just a heads up, leverage libraries like React Beautiful D&D powered by companies like Atlassian or whatever, just because they've solved these very difficult problems before. They had teams of people working on this stuff, and just use the thing. Trying to not reinvent, but trying to implement your own kind of, say, animation engine or drag and drop library. It's not impossible. It's just very, very hard. Anyway, yeah, iframe resizing technique, and we have a little bit of some similar to the ghost experience, and that is this thing. You see how the height of this header changes from here to here, right? Oh man, so what needs to happen is the height of the header is positioned absolutely, right? That means it needs to know the height of the content within it. So in order for you to, and these you can imagine these are two different pages in the browser. You're going from the index page, or sorry, the answers page to the ask page. So now like a new content needs to load and render. So what needs to happen is this header needs to render the next content for a brief second, keep it hidden from view, calculate the height of the content, and then apply it. There's a sequence of events that needs to happen so that the height can be adjusted from, say, 80 to 120 or whatever it needs to be. So now you get this kind of smooth transitional experience. Little details like this are, at least from a web context, it's very difficult to achieve just because we don't have APIs within the browser or even from libraries like React that facilitate this. There are libraries that are starting to try to help with this, which is great. But this is something I'm very envious of from the mobile world, whether you're doing React Native stuff or just like Swift and iOS and Android development, because they have all this stuff figured out. What the experiences we're doing here from where Help Scout, Beacon, or Intercom. Intercom's very slick, by the way. I really like Intercom. You're basically trying to emulate the experiences you get from mobile applications, which is great. But it's very difficult because we don't have all the utilities, the libraries, the niceties, the automatic height calculation stuff you get from those mobile libraries. So we have to figure out our own techniques in order to achieve them. That could be, in this case, ghost elements to try to predictively estimate the sizing of something ahead of time so that we can apply it to something. So now we get some transitions that look like this. Yeah, it's a very small kind of use case, but yeah, very helpful when you need it. And yeah, I think that's all I have for today. It's a very short little live stream talking about ghost elements. I'm just checking the chat. No one said anything. That's perfectly fine. Sean blames Apple. No, man, don't blame Apple. It's I think it's wonderful. Should have stuck with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript for iOS apps. Yeah, that's really interesting because back in the day, back in the heyday when the iPhone originally came out, I'm gonna change my camera for a little bit. So yeah, back in the day when Steve Jobs first stepped on stage and the iPhone was announced, remember Flash? Flash was a thing, and the iPhone did not support Flash and was very HTML5 focused and very HTML5 heavy, and that was very controversial back in the day. But because of that, HTML5 dominated. Flash is no longer much of a thing, and the Safari WebKit engine that iOS had, you would think that they would leverage a little bit more HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It just wasn't, the hardware wasn't powerful enough to kind of handle that. We eventually saw some of that where people built like bridges between the web tech world and the mobile phone rendering world. We had frameworks like PhoneGap, I think it was called PhoneGap, and some other ones that allowed for this to happen. And then JavaScript libraries started to come, be more of a thing. Ember, Angular, Vue, and eventually React. But yeah, the mobile, the web technology, man, it can't do a lot of the fancy things. It can do fancy things that mobile can do, but not to the same performance level as what you can get from iOS. At least not yet. We're getting there. It's very exciting to see libraries like React Spring and all these wonderful things kind of push that envelope. And I'm very grateful for the experiences that have emerged from the mobile space, from the creative minds of designers and engineers and product people, because it's pushed so many boundaries, right? Like the gesture-based touch interface is so magnificent. especially at least for desktop. If you have like a touchpad, whether you're on usually you get that with tablets, not tablets, sorry, laptops, and it gets touch screens for laptops. It's so nice. But man, coding for that stuff is so hard because from the web, traditionally what happens when you change from one state to the other, you snap it, right? It was display none, it was not here. Now you need it. Just now display block. Now it just appears, right? This box appears out of nowhere. But like what mobile has gotten us to be more used to and now expect is for elements to like magically transition and resize and do all these wonderful things, which again I'm very grateful for. But it's very hard. Just because JavaScript, we don't have a lot of things that support that. There's no animation engine really that the browser gives us, so we gotta use libraries or make up our own. Yeah, it's my little thing about mobile experiences. Cordova, that was it. Cordova. Thanks, Niels. Yeah, I recall playing with the phone gap. Mac does such a great job at animations. It's easy to forget that on Windows it's just never running smoothly. Yeah, OS level things are really, really cool. Oh man, that reminds me. I'm gonna go on a little thing because I'm live streaming and want to talk about stuff. Do you remember Windows 7? I think Windows 7. What was that? What was that interface that had Aurora? I don't know. It was that kind of see-through-y this thing. What was this called? I don't know. I forget what it's called. But for folks who have used Windows 7 or whatever it was back in the day, they had this really nice glass effect, where like your windows, you can see the blur. Arrow. That was it. Thank you so much. They had this arrow UI. Yeah, where you had this glass effect kind of thing, which I mean, you get right now with Mac OS. But back in the day, I don't know when Windows 7 came out, but you had this effect for your Windows, and it looked really cool. I was using this before I transitioned over to Mac OS, but I remember seeing a YouTube video where they described how this was actually done. So what they needed to do was, I'm gonna see if I can draw it. So this is just pretend this is the desktop. This is what you see. This is what you saw. And this is a window, like your Finder or whatever it is. I'm gonna make it red. Let's pretend this is arrow, right? So what they needed to actually do was off screen. They needed to duplicate your desktop, and here they would apply the kind of arrow effects, right? Off screen, and you would have your window where like your ghost window. Oh, this is a perfect example of ghost elements. You'd have your ghost kind of window here so that it can absorb the styles from your off-screen arrow thing, from this off-screen rendered arrow thing, and based on how that looks, now it can apply that glossy, glassy, transparent effect to this one. So anytime you moved this why is it duplicating? Anytime, please stop duplicating. I just need to move it. Okay, so anytime you move this, right, the off-screen one will move here, and then that's how you kind of get that effect. It's so cool. Oh shoot, you can't see my screen. Let me just do all this over again. Thank you so much. Now you can see my screen. Okay. So Windows 7. I saw this this video where they described how it was done. So, and I may be wrong. Don't take my word for it, but this makes sense to me, and I remember seeing this video. So you have your desktop screen. Thank you so much, chat. You are lovely. I love you guys. He needs one of those overlays. Yeah. I'm very scrappy with this streaming stuff. I really need to up my game. Anyway, you had your desktop, and then off screen, they would duplicate that, right? That desktop and apply the arrow effects kind of on it. The transparent, glassy, all that kind of stuff on here. Can you see my screen now? I think you can. Cool. And now I'm going to draw my window. Let's pretend this is your Finder window, right? they would render that off screen. Again, this is, you don't see this. You do not see this at all. They would render it here, and then this would absorb the glass arrow effects on this guy. And once that happens, now you can apply it onto here, and that is how they did the arrow effect. And anytime you move this here, of course, this would need to move, and they just kind of coordinated in this fashion. Yeah, very, very cool, very ingenious kind of way to achieve, I don't know, a UI that in a way, I guess, has become iconic with Windows 7. I remember I really liked it back in the day, and I remember Windows, this was like really laggy. This is actually something I disabled by default just because I guess my PC hardware couldn't really handle it that much. But yeah, I mean, I guess you can kind of understand why. Just because they had to duplicate your entire, desktop off screen and kind of do stuff behind the scenes to kind of handle this thing. I don't like. It's been. I would love to know how Mac OS does it now, cause let me see. Yeah, like Safari has like a built-in blur effect that you can do. Mac OS has it, so here you can see that the background is kind of blurred on this. I'm very curious to see how Apple does it. Probably the same effect, but I don't know. Need to find some sort of engineering video where they talk about it. Cool. Thanks for that little tangent, chat. That was really fun. And let me see. Is there anything else? If not, then I guess I can kind of wrap up. No? Maybe not. So, yeah, thank you so much for spending some of your afternoon with me today. This was a little bit of a short one, but it was a fun one. Um, yeah, thanks, friends. And yeah, I hope you take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and have yourselves a wonderful, wonderful day. Stay happy and safe on your side, and I'll catch you later. Bye. Turning off the stream. Oh no, that's my mail. Man, one day I'll get this right. Stop streaming. No, don't click that. I need to click end stream. There we go. End stream. Catch you later. Bye.